So shall we start off on this employment and skills forum? So see, I'm chairing the event, so I'll be asking Charlotte and Tony some questions, putting some points, and we'll discuss them and see what opinions and whether we can solve the problems of the world through that. But first, start with Charlotte first, if you'd like to just introduce yourself to the people watching, and to Tony as well. And then Tony, if you'd like to introduce yourself afterwards, just who you are and you know what you do and why
who I am and where I come from.
That's it, yeah, all that. Do your 60 seconds.
So I'm Charlotte Pitt. I have an HR consultancy business, very cleverly named the HR Consultants. So it makes it very obvious what we do. We work with businesses in all different sectors to help them with their people challenges. I've worked in HR for my entire long career, so I've spent a very long time getting very involved in all kinds of people challenges. So looking forward to an interesting debate today, I think.
Lovely.
Excellent. Thank you, Charlotte.
And I'm Tony Solomon. I work with the GEM project, which is an employability project which supports people in Gloucestershire that for whatever reason are dealing with circumstances that are making it difficult for them to get into work or back into work. And we provide one-on-one support for those people. Yeah,
excellent. Thanks, Tony. So I thought I'd start off with a hot topic at the moment, which is remote working. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about remote working and things like that, but I'm particularly interested in the two aspects of it, because obviously everybody recognises that there are opportunities in remote working, but I'm also interested in the pitfalls. What do we need to look out for with that? And I know particularly for Charlotte in HR, there's some there's some issues that employers quite often might forget about when they haven't got staff in the office. So I just wondered what your opinion was on remote working and what employers would need to be looking for and to be aware of in their policies and practices.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think, I mean, Steve and I, we've been chatting about this a little bit over the last week or so, and it's at the moment, well, so for me as an HR professional, I've spent years and years banging the drum for employers to be more flexible, to trust their people. It's what people have wanted for a long time, to be able to work remotely. And it's fantastic that now that sort of case has been proven. So there are lots of roles that can work from home, lots of people that are able to, but it's so that's fantastic. However, it doesn't kind of stop there, and we need to remember that it's not right for all roles and it's not right for all people either. So there's that sort of hurdle to get over. But then also, for me, it's about leadership and equipping leaders with the skills to be able to manage their people remotely. It's not just a case of making sure that people have the technology and the equipment and that their role is able to be done remotely. It's making sure that we're really helping leaders to understand what they need to be doing with their people, because leadership is hard whether people are sat with you, but if they're not, it's 10 times harder. So there are definite pitfalls, and I think if leaders aren't they're not really on it with their communication, then that's a big gap, and where things can really start going wrong quite quickly. I think we've all heard of some really big horror stories about people during lockdown. They've been working from home and they haven't had any conversations with their line manager, for months and months, and it's just quite shocking, really. So I think there's lots of positives certainly that come from now this situation we're in, where remote working is definitely going to become a lot more mainstream and a lot more of the norm, and in terms of being able to access those big wide talent pools, it's fantastic for employers, but there's definitely a lot of work to be done from a leadership perspective.
I agree. Yes, a lot of managers nowadays are taught how to manage, or they're not even taught. They just manage directly and manage by rules and regulations rather than delivery. And I think they're having to learn that. And I mean, Tony, how do you think that's going to affect? You work a lot with you know, with Gem, obviously, which is involved a lot in getting people back into work and helping with work. How do you think the people that Gem works with are going to respond to remote working, and will they find that will make it easier for them to get into employment, or would it be more of a hurdle to them not being in an office with people?
It's dependent on the person and their particular situation. But take, for example, we were chatting about Cheltenham. Some of the buildings in Cheltenham are simply inaccessible for somebody, say, with a physical disability. So working from home could be just the answer. And, you know, building what Charlotte's saying, we've been accelerated into home working. This should have happened years and years and years and years ago. I worked for a large organisation. We had video conferencing. We never used it. We used to get on an aeroplane and go to have a face-to-face meeting. And now you can look at the foolishness of that and recognise that, you know, wow, this is here. But like everything, we've got to get the balance. It is difficult to build team morale if you're all stuck at home, and as Charlotte's saying, you're not having any connection with your line manager or perhaps even your colleagues. But it's really good to see that organisations are having to become more flexible, having to trust their team, their staff, because this is what's stopped it happening before. Because we as managers, as leaders, see that our people are going to be at home in their pyjamas with their feet up on the desk drinking tea all day. But it will require a completely different way of managing. You know, the old days of, well, he's a good guy because he comes in early and he leaves late.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous, but that's the way people have managed over the years. Going forward, it's got to be, this is Tony's role. This are the outcomes and the expectations we have for the projects he's running. And how he does it, whether he does it at midnight or over breakfast, doesn't matter to me as the manager, providing the job gets done to the right standard. So a lot more trust is required. But the lovely thing is we talk about work-life balance and have been for about 25 years now, I think. It's been very fashionable, isn't it? It's never been achieved. But I actually think now we have an opportunity going forward post-COVID to really get a grip on what work-life balance is and make it happen.
Yeah, and I think people have, during this time, really started to get an understanding of what that means to them. And I think that employees are going to be driving that agenda a lot more because they've had a taste of it and they've realised that actually, you know, being able to be at home, do the school run, you know, whatever it may be, is actually very valuable to them. And it's, I think businesses, employers would find it very difficult to sort of try and curtail that and rein people back in. So it is going to be driven, I think, from an employee perspective, very much.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about the school run and how that fits in. I've literally been recruiting for one of my clients for a test role. And actually, because now they're working remotely, they can recruit anywhere. And there's a candidate in Tetbury, not Tetbury, Telford, who absolutely massively experienced, really experienced, on the budget, and, you know, got all the consultancy experience as well as the technical experience. But she can only work remotely because she has a 3-year-old son at school. And she has to be able to pick him up, especially at the moment's notice, to pick him up from school and take him back if they all have to isolate or anything like that. So it's very difficult for her to get in the office. 12 months ago, she wouldn't have been on the radar.
Yeah.
Now is, oh my God, we can get somebody this capable, you know, and it's changed things dramatically. And you know, and following on from that, there was an article that was brought to my attention by my wife yesterday in the HR review, and I thought Tony would find this interesting as he's ex-Zurich. But last year, Zurich did a little test. They advertised all their vacancies as part-time, job share, or flexible working. To see what happened, and they got a 20% increase in female applications. So that means they increased their hire for women at senior levels by 33% due to that change. But there's also got a general 16% rise in women applying, and there was more men applying for the roles as well. It encouraged more, and so that was pre-COVID, but if you think that that's going forward to all businesses with remote working, there's that potential that balance, the gender gap, could be equalised just by the fact of we're all working a bit more flexibly.
Yeah.
And that's
Wouldn't that be lovely?
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah,
And
you're right. And that, you know, going back to what I said earlier about that sort of having that really wide ranging talent pool to recruit from now. I mean, it's fantastic for both employers and employees, really. I mean, I know very few businesses that are planning to go back wholly to the office. In fact, I don't know any. None of my clients are planning on going back to work as they were before. Most are planning on having some sort of hybrid model. So, you know, some time in the office, some at home, which I think is perfect, because then you have that time where you can do the human stuff, because we know that we do all still need time with people. We haven't had that much lately, but it is, you know, Zoom can't replace everything. But then the time when you are at home, you can be incredibly productive and get your head down and crack on with stuff. I know a couple of businesses that have decided to pull out of offices completely, and they're just going to have everybody now remotely working from home. But being able to then recruit anyone from anywhere, I think that's just, that for businesses, that's just astonishing.
Yeah, it really opens up the pool.
And as a recruiter, Steve, that makes your life a whole lot easier.
Not necessarily, actually. I was talking about that just before we come on the call, and I've got a question I'll go to from Sue Gilding, which relates to this in a moment. But yes, call I was on before, I was talking to a printer who's just recruited a new person into his business, and he said he was shocked at the job applications he was getting. One person applied, and where he was on the application, he had to put his experience relevant to the role. He wrote astronaut. And you know, this guy was thinking, well, how has he got so much time to waste to just put an application in and put that on there? And then he's wasted my time. And I said, welcome to my world. You know, the applications I get, I'm recruiting for the CEO of a tech company using cutting edge tech, and I get somebody apply for the job, and their most recent experience was 2 years ago when they were working as a part-time cleaner. Now, they're obviously not going to be relevant, but they're clogging up all the applications, and that feeds to Sue Gilding's question, and she wants to know what the panel thinks, or how the panel thinks people can make sure their job applications really stand out with that huge increase in the number of applications for each role, because of course we've got all the people who are on furlough, lost their jobs, people who are living hundreds of miles away who can now apply. So we'll start with Tony. How do you think people can make their applications stand out, Tony? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I think I'd step back a little bit, actually, because there's the job application, but then there's the job role profile and what the employer's actually looking for. I think there's a whole heap of things we could discuss in that area, because, you know, my experience of working in the corporate world, must have 5 years experience, must be an excellent communicator, must have a first degree in something or other from a red brick. If you actually stopped and said, for what and why? Without really understanding what the role is. So we have to, I think, unravel the whole recruitment process and really rethink from the point the job is discussed in a business as being necessary, to how that's then portrayed to, as you say, Charlotte, attract the widest possible pool of talent. But then for those people to be able to apply in a meaningful way. And I think there's a number of key things. There's how to make your application stand out. Firstly, get a real grip on what that role is. Through LinkedIn and others, try and find relations that can, people you're in relationship with that can give you more insight, as well as what you can gain from the web. Mirror the language that the employer's using. Make sure that your CV is tailored. I'm not saying rewrite a CV for every job, but the summary statement, reflect keywords in the summary statement, that's going to help. And a covering letter. And we find with a number of the participants that are on the GEM project, where they've been working alongside what we call our navigator developers, our people that provide one-to-one support, that very often a reference from that navigator developer saying, I've worked with Tony now for 6 months. I found him to be reliable, enthusiastic, keen. He wants to work. I think he'd be suitable for this job with Morrison's or whatever, because All those sorts of things can help set you apart, to try and get that application to stand out, or even to email or find out who the interviewer is, by a telephone or whatever, and email that interviewer, even though it may have been an online process, to say, look, I've submitted this online. I'm really keen to work for you because hope to hear more in the future. Won't always get round the online systems that really do create massive barriers to people. But I think there's some ideas there.
Don't get me started on applicant tracking systems. Oh, terrible idea. And they're all there because to make recruiters' life easier and not to recruit the right people, in my opinion. And when you see them advertised, when they are selling them, that is how they're selling them. They are selling them as to make your life easier so you don't have to spend as much time looking at CVs. Which, when you see as many CVs as I do, and probably Tony and Charlotte, you have as well, they are no CV is the same. So,
no, and I think on that point, using, I mean, it sounds very basic, but making your CV literally stand out. So, you know, perhaps coming away from just the boring black and white text, you know, stick some logos on there from the companies that you've worked at, try and make it a little bit more creative, because that literally, when I've just been hiring for a role and you're going through CV after CV and you get a bit kind of, you know, if you put yourself in the shoes of the person screening the applications, how can I make this physically stand out? Some people put a picture on, you know, a photo. That's some people sort of don't like that. I quite like that because it is different and stands out. But I think, anything like that you can do. I know one lady who's been on the job market, and she has, in an attempt to make herself stand out, she's, I don't know if you've met Katie, Steve, she's been on some networking, so she's been networking, which is great. She's been to some networking meetings.
Oh, I think she was on a call I was on, recently,
She built, she created her own webpage that showcases her and everything that she's achieved and the roles that she's had. So just things to try and set yourself apart from all of those other people that might possibly be applying for roles as well. And I think, like Tony says, trying to get the name of the person, usually on the job ad it will have a contact name, try and email them, because even if it doesn't do anything but just make them remember your name when they're going through applications, then it's worthwhile.
I agree with. Sorry, Tony.
Sorry, no, we found also with Gem and Forwards, which is an organisation with GCC that looks after people specifically with learning difficulties, that doing video, where applications may not stand out, they do videos, personal videos, and they're fantastic. They're really inspiring. And as you say, Charlotte, definitely stands out from the black and white type on a bit of paper.
Absolutely. I always say when I'm talking to people about writing their CVs and things, I always say that think of it like a book, and I say the first part, your profile, as you mentioned, Tony, the summary, it has to be interesting and it has to be relevant, because if you look at that profile and it has no relation to the job that somebody's applying for, it doesn't match with the type of company, the number of times I have somebody apply for a job and in their profile, they say they're looking for a completely different job. And I think, well, why do I want to talk to you then?
Yeah, make it relevant. Definitely.
It's got to be relevant. And then if it's relevant, if it's interesting and they look like, from the profile, they look like the type of person that would fit with the job and the company, then I'm going to be much more interested to read the rest. And actually, you end up giving people, or I give people a bit of leeway. If the profile's right, if they look like the right type of person from the profile, then if they haven't quite got that bit of experience that we're looking for, I'll say, yes, but they might be the type of person who can learn that and pick that up. They've got all the other attributes to go in. So let's have a chat with them anyway and find out. But if you don't have that bit right at the start, I think it just makes everything look a little bit more bland as you go on.
Sorry, Steve, just trying to get your personality as much as you can, because it's, I mean, it's really hard. I've done it as a recruiter. I've seen a CV and thought, ugh, but then ended up meeting them. And, it's like the CV doesn't represent this person at all, because they're brilliant and they're full of enthusiasm and you know, all of this good stuff. Try, and it's hard, it's not easy, but just try as much as you can to get some personality onto that CV.
Absolutely. And like you say, using logos and things like that to stick that out. And, you know, if you are a colourful personality, putting some colourful logos on there will start bringing out your personality there.
Yeah.
So yeah, and using the network. I mean, so few people use their networks, and, you know, especially if it's you know, you're applying for a big employer, to a job with a big employer in town. You know, you never know, somebody you know, or somebody your friends know, or your parents know, or your relatives know, could know somebody who works in that firm or could work there, and they can go and put the word in.
Using LinkedIn for that kind of thing, you know, it's absolutely prime for it. It's so easy. Just search the company, see who's there that, you know, you're connected with. And people, especially right now, people know how hard it is in the job market. They want to help. So, you know, people shouldn't feel awkward or embarrassed about reaching out. I think everybody wants to try and help somebody find the right job. So we veered off on a tangent, I think, but
we've gone off again. But I hope that's I hope we've answered Sue's question, and it's been helpful for her. So actually, I suppose the next thing I wanted to sort of have a chat with you about is obviously young people have been disproportionately impacted by COVID. Youth unemployment is depending on which statistics you look, but it's around about 10% higher than the UK average at the moment, and almost double the jobs. Young people lost almost double the jobs that older people lost in the first lockdown. So it's actually led to a spike in university applications. You know, with people thinking whether it's, well, I'll go to university because I won't find a job, or go to university because it'll give me more opportunity to find a job. So my question on that is, do the panel think that university education is as valuable to employers as it used to be? Does it still have that value? And then the second part to that is, well, what are the alternatives to university? And on that, should employers take more responsibility for providing training rather than leaving it to the education sector and relying on them to provide the skills they need?
Can I start on that one with the universities? It's a difficult one. It's a pendulum, isn't it? And there was a time when a relatively small percentage of very bright people went to university and so forth. And now I think it's something like 50% of our young people go off to university, and it seems to be the norm. There seems to be a lack of careers advice in a lot of educational settings, and a lot of sense of pushing people towards getting the grades needed to go to uni. From an employer's perspective, what used to be a massive differentiator is no longer a differentiator, unless it's in the professional classes, medicine, engineering, or whatever it might be. So to have a degree in what I call a hobby subject is, well, it's good, and I can draw from that you've got certain skills and qualities, but it doesn't necessarily bring to me what I'm wanting, which is somebody who's work ready, able to get the job done that I want. And I've personally got a bit of a thing about universities, because I think we're selling our children or our young people short, because ultimately we, all of us here today, could quite easily do a degree online. We could meet with our buddies in a post-COVID world once a month for a bit of social whatever. We do not know to go traipsing around the country to great big buildings. And the fundamental issue with universities is they need paying for. It's not about what's best for the young person, it's what's best for the system. So if you are thinking about wanting to pursue your hobby, fantastic, but you could also work alongside that. You don't need to rack up a bill of £50,000 to start your life, to leave university without differentiation to work in a coffee shop. And even that's becoming more difficult. A bit of a hackneyed view of universities, but we have sold our young people short on the vision of the mirage of what that's going to do for your future, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Tony. And I think the fact that there are so many, pre-COVID, it was such a tough job market for graduates anyway. So, they've spent 3 or 4 years at university, supposedly learning all of these skills, racking up thousands and thousands of pounds worth of debt in the expectation that they'll come out on a good salary and they'll be able to pay that back, and they can't even get you know, an entry level low paid role. So yeah, I think you're right, we have really sort of missold this to young people. I think in terms of alternatives, there are, you know, apprenticeships have completely been a game changer for further education. I know that once upon a time, you know, you'd think of an apprenticeship and think about the old kind of, I'm going to say YTS, you know, working as a mechanic or a labourer or something like that. And it's not that at all anymore. And I'm sure, Tony, you might know a bit more about it than I do, but I was talking to an HR director yesterday, and he didn't go to university, started his career with an apprenticeship. But that was probably quite unusual actually 20 years ago. Whereas now, you know, I know a young 20-something-year-old project manager, she decided to do an apprenticeship instead of university, has just had the most fantastic early start to her career, and has been able to take a sabbatical and go off travelling. So, you know, she's been able to do that thing that young people like to do as well, and has none of the debt, loads of experience in terms of skills, and ready, you know, more than ready for work. And it's just, I'm such a big advocate for apprenticeships, because there are so many different, you know, any role you can think of, pretty much you can get an apprenticeship to do that job.
Yeah. I know Tony wants to jump in there, but I just wanted, I was talking to Myra Billingham at Gloucestershire yesterday, and she was telling me they have 1,500 apprentices at any one time registered, and they're getting 700 applications every year. And this COVID period, it's shot up, it's rocketed. Wow. With the apprentice. So it looks like that's something else that maybe has been accelerated by COVID. But sorry, Tony, carry on.
No, not at all. I think it's really, really good to hear that, because I totally agree with you, Charlotte. I think apprenticeships, I was shocked when I first really started to look into apprenticeships. In the old days, it was the trades. You know, if you were an apprentice, you were in the trades. But now, you know, marketing, media, as you say, pretty much anything and everything is available. And I'm a great believer in people getting stuck into work. Getting into the habit of work, getting into the habit of learning and developing those skills. And if you're going to differentiate your CV, putting on it you've got a 2-1 in geography, putting it on it you've been an apprenticeship for the last 2.5, 3 years, definitely does set you apart.
That's it.
I'm finding, I can't remember if it was you I was talking to about this recently, Tony, but about the disparity. People who get a first in university are potentially, they're not as well regarded by employers as people who got a 2-1 but have work experience. So if they got a first and they've only studied and they've never done any, you know, had any practical work experience, they're struggling, whereas the 2-1s with a bit of work experience are getting viewed as more employable.
I understand it. Experience is so important. And I think with apprenticeships, you know, you get the best of both. You get to continue learning and doing some of that classroom-based stuff, which has its place. But then the really important thing is that you get the experience, the hands-on experience, and like Tony said, getting in the habit of work, you know, of working a proper, doing what you're going to need to do for a very long time. Those skills are things that it sounds obvious, but as an employer, you really want that stuff.
You do. I've just recruited for 2 separate companies, 2 social media marketing people, and both that were successful were both level 3 apprentice graduates. And you know, that's what the employers picked up on. They had the experience. They as they learnt, they delivered, and they had a portfolio of delivery that they could take to the interview. Whereas the graduates didn't have that portfolio and they couldn't evidence what they were delivering. And you know, and I think that's something where I think maybe universities would need to evolve and maybe take more responsibility for that employability training.
Yeah, I know that when I was at university, I did a sandwich year, which was sort of a bit of a stepping stone. So that was a way of trying to get experience, so that graduates were ready for work, and that definitely does help, I think.
Yeah.
But, yeah, for me, it's just, I mean, it's very enjoyable going to university and, you know, having the lifestyle and all of that sort of stuff, but I'm not sure that the payoff is necessarily worth it in terms of debt and that sort of stuff.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a tricky one.
Yeah. So we've talked about apprenticeships and you know, which is interesting because apprenticeships is training on both sides. There's training by a college or a training provider, but the employer also has the responsibility to provide on-the-job training with apprenticeships. And you hear quite often over the decades, employers have complained, and we see it in the news and the media, there is a skills gap, there is a skills shortage. Does the panel think that maybe employers should take more ownership of filling that gap and actually taking people with transferable skills and then training them in there? I mean, perfect example is all the people who've lost their jobs over COVID from travel and tourism, hospitality, etc. They all have a skill set that could potentially be used by employers. And should employers say, well, we'll take them and train them, or is it a responsibility of the state to provide that training and to help them get those skills?
I think with an employer, what you're looking for is the innate ability, that person's innate ability to do the job. As an employer, as a contract with that employee, we should be providing the acquired ability they need through training on an ongoing basis. Create the motivation and the opportunity around that, and you're going to have a very successful employee. So, you know, coming out of tourism or coming out of the hospitality sector, as you say, Steve, these people are going to have a massive amount of skills and so forth that are highly prized and valuable, but they may not have been in that particular industry they're applying for. So we've got to be able to see how we transfer people's skills by having proper training programs in place. But it's that innate ability we're recruiting. Our job as an employer is to provide the acquired ability so that we can do that job well and not shirk that responsibility.
Yeah, I think it definitely is something that takes planning. It needs to be thought out and done properly. I think the problem is that lots of employers and recruiters tend to look at experience and CVs in quite a linear fashion, and you sort of look at past experience and, well, have they got similar experience, rather than looking at, you say, sort of transferable skills. And it's not often that you come across recruiters that are able or have that approach, I suppose. And the other problem is that quite often businesses are very short-termist. They're not really looking at too far into the future to think, well, if we do this now, this is what the long-term benefit will be. Very often it's very much focused on, I've got this vacancy to fill here and now, what's going to be the quickest way to do that so someone can hit the ground running and have the biggest impact, rather than thinking about the sort of employment relationship that you'd create, the loyalty that you'd create with that individual and the engagement, etc., etc. So yeah, we've got a way to go with that, I would say, but there's definitely, I'd say it's responsibility of both the state and employers as well. This needs to be very much a cohesive approach. I think if we want to, you know, especially after COVID, it's going to be a long and difficult road ahead, isn't it, for lots of people, and we all need to take collective responsibility for supporting people with that.
Yeah, I think so, and I think maybe the Kickstart scheme might be the start of that sort of collaboration with, you know, it's almost a job guarantee scheme, as it were, and it's focused on, you know, providing that employability, that future employability, that skills training in the workplace, which, you know, I know talking to some people at the DWP, they are really hoping that it is not going to go away at the end of next year, and that some form it's going to keep going and be made successful. So that could be the start, as I say, Charlotte, of that collaboration of state and employer.
Yes.
It's nice if
building
that a bit easier though, wouldn't it?
Yes.
But there you are.
Yeah.
Another matter.
Yeah, and that I suppose with that, you know, transferring skills and taking on people who might not necessarily be the immediate choice, walk in and being ready. And think about, you know, obviously diversity and inclusion are something that is very much a watchword at the moment, even more so over this year with Black Lives Matter and things. It's really brought it more to the fore. And I was looking at some statistics and let me just get them up exactly, because it was that senior positions are only 1.5% of senior positions are held by people with dark coloured skin, by people of colour. And that's interesting because, you know, lots of companies, especially corporates, you know, are spending all this time and doing a lot to say we're open, we have equality and diversity principles in practice, we are hiring based on those principles. Why does the panel think that that is not getting into the senior positions yet? Why is it that the effort's being put in somewhere, but it's not actually working?
I would say it's probably, well, it's a combination of things, but that those companies that are saying they are doing that are a very small snapshot of what's actually representative of businesses in this country. So if you look at the number of SMEs that make up the UK companies, what was it, 99% of them are SMEs. So very few of those, I would say, because I work with lots of them, have any kind of diversity and inclusion agenda. It's not even something that factors into their thoughts really at all. So those big corporates that you talk about, absolutely, I'm sure that there is, it's on their agenda. They probably, in some respects, pay a bit of lip service to it. It's been a bit of a, like you say, a buzz phrase that's been around this year because of Black Lives Matter. I think there's a whole heap of education that needs to happen for leaders, for staff generally, because I think lots of people talk about the fact that Black Lives Matter, but it doesn't filter through into employment policy and practice. From my opinion, that's definitely what I see working with businesses.
Yeah, I think it was great to hear what you were saying about Zurich earlier and how they've gone out and promoted flexibility and attracting more women. When I worked with them, say, 10 years ago, that wouldn't necessarily have been the case. We were always very, very good at CSR, corporate social responsibility. So literally millions of pounds would be spent in the UK and internationally supporting various projects. Staff were given days off to do good works for people, which was brilliant. But if we looked internally at our workforce, you know, generalising massively, white middle class. Now that's not because at board level we were saying, right, we want to have a white middle class organisation. It was because of the whole process of recruitment. From the way the job was advertised to the way the interviews took place and so forth. So with diversity and inclusion, whilst it's a buzzword and big organisations have a diversity and inclusion manager, which is brilliant, I agree with you, Charlotte, it's of little use unless it's properly understood and trained through to that middle management level who are so often responsible for the recruitment of staff. Yeah. You might get the message on high, we're into diversity and inclusion. A lot of organisations don't know the difference, what the difference between diversity and inclusion really is. And it's a complete rethink. And one of the reasons they don't get higher up the chain, if you like, which is, I think, your question, is because it's projectised. So we're going to increase, should we say, our disabled community, whatever that means, right? We'll almost put some numbers around it. And it's not incorporated as the way of life, as the way we do things around here. Yeah. So rather than getting somebody, say, with on the autistic spectrum, and then being surprised that there are certain communication difficulties somewhere down the line, they bake in as an organisation ways of handling that, knowing full well what's required in terms of special adjustments maybe for an individual. And it becomes the norm as opposed to, oh, that's our... Well, I won't even go into the various segments, but diversity and inclusion has got to be just, when we forget about the words, we'll have won, we'll have got there. Yeah. Right now, it's everybody said, what's the difference? What is it? You know, what are we doing it? There's a huge way to go. There's a huge way to go. And the more role models that can come forward, the better. and the more we can encourage people and provide the right frameworks, environments, training, appraisal processes, promotion processes. Massive amount of work, but exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a client recently, they were talking to me about the fact that their PR team, they'd had conversations internally about how it's very male dominated, which is quite usual for it's quite unusual for PR. So they were so the senior manager and middle manager very aware of this. They were recruiting for a role. We must, do something about this imbalance. And what do they go and hire but another man for the team, because he was the best one for the job, and it was kind of convenient really, so that they didn't need to then go and do another search and to keep looking. And I think this is the thing, it's not always convenient, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we should stop the process there. So yeah, there's a long way to go, and I very much like what you said, Tony, about the fact that when these words aren't ones that we need to use, then we know that we've made progress. Yeah,
I think they were great words, and yes, that's how we hope it will be. But it's interesting what you were saying, Charlotte, about, I think it's something like 99% of all businesses in the UK are classed as SMEs, and you said that I have the same. I work with a lot of SMEs, and they don't have those diversity and inclusivity policies in place. And I think for a lot of them, they think it's complicated. They see complication. They say, "Oh, a big business, they can have an expert in that come in." But as a small business, owner, run and managed quite often, they see the difficulty. Do you think that there's there's any way that small businesses can easily improve on that knowledge? Is there some way that we can help small businesses understand and have access to diverse thinking and make it easier for them? Because of course a lot of the time they are looking for the easy solution.
I mean, there's a lot of training that's out there, and training only goes so far. But in terms of helping to educate, so if you've got a business owner or a leader within a business that wants to educate themselves, then ACAS, for example, do a lot of free training, and a lot of that is in the areas of diversity and inclusion. So there's certainly sort of bringing that more to the attention of these businesses. I don't know. I mean, you can take a horse to water, right? But kind of actually getting them to act.
Get them to drink.
It's very different. I don't know, Tony. What do you think?
It is very different. I mean, I've got some lovely stories with some of the people we've worked with, because a lot of our participants wouldn't interview well in a typical interview, one-sided high-pressure interrogation, which sums up most interviews these days. But what we find is if we can get the employer, if we can work with the employer to provide a job trial, a work trial, so they can see what that individual can actually do and is capable of in the role, then we get outstanding results. And I'll give you just one example, if I may, of an employer in Cheltenham, Specsavers. And they came to us to the GEM project a while ago because they have certain jobs which they would describe as being repetitive and boring. For me, that would be a lot of data entry and things like that, but in their world, that's to do with glasses. And the first person we hooked up with them was Natalie. Now, Natalie has Down syndrome, and she's been there now 2.5 years, done the job absolutely brilliantly. James has followed on. James was 35, had never had a paid job in his life. He has learning difficulties. He's a bit of a national superstar now. He's done all sorts of things like raise money for defibrillator. He's been on the BBC Points West and all the rest of it. And when we took the MP down to meet with the lady, the director of Specsavers, Melanie, he said, "Why do you do this?" Expecting a sort of, "Oh, well, it's the right thing to do, isn't it? Give people a chance." She said it was a business imperative. I have jobs that I'm forever turning around because people come along from the job centre and they want to leave as soon as they've got here because they don't enjoy the work. James and Natalie love the work. They've had a massive impact on morale, team morale. They're great to have around the place, and they've had an impact on the bottom line. So it really is helping employees to access, as you mentioned earlier, a wider talent pool. To really help them to open their eyes to seeing the advantages. And post-Brexit, for some of our industry, it's going to be really, really important they do that. To look more widely at, marginalised groups, if you like, whatever they are, Black Lives Matter or whatever it might be. Because there's huge capability. And the one thing about our guys, they want to work. They're not coming along telling you they want a job and, well, when I get there, see how we feel. They want to work. And we're lovely success stories we get from that. Sorry, I've probably gone off a tangent, but...
No, that's lovely to hear about those real life stories.
And I think those stories, I think we need to hear more of those. I think in the small business world, I think stories like that should be, we should be seeing a lot more of them, and that will help with that understanding. As we were talking earlier, and Charlotte was saying about SMEs struggling to see the value. If there's stories like that are out all the time, and people are talking about that, having those conversations, having the conversations we're having now, it will help those small businesses to think, oh, well, we could do it and there's a benefit to us. So let's get involved. So I suppose it's again, it's one of those things, as it becomes more commonplace, as it gets talked about more, it's like a snowball. It'll start growing, hopefully.
I agree with you, and I think it's debunking the myths, because people are worried if they employ somebody, say, with a disability, can they ever fire them, etc., etc. There's a lot of mythology around disability, which of course is very wide-ranging in what it is. In fact, there are over 7 million people in the UK with a disability or long-term health condition. So it's debunking those myths and getting people to recognise the value and the desire these people have to work and be loyal. And one of the things I think post-COVID is we'll all be rushing into work because we've lost our jobs post whatever it is, but we'll be getting whatever job we can just to tide us over. So I'll come and work for you, Charlotte. You'll go, that's great, Tony, but I'll be off in 6 months because I'll actually find what I want. So, there's that small businesses can't afford turnover. Such an expensive thing, recruiting people. I think there's lots of opportunity.
No, absolutely. And we're coming towards the sort of the last bit. Before I sort of ask for questions from the watchers here, I'll start with Tony first, as you're on my screen as you spoke last. But just any sort of final thoughts or questions that you would like to put to the panel?
Final thoughts is that we have come, no disrespect to HR, but we've come an awful long way over many years. And I believe with certain organisations, we've got to a point of complexity, which is now precluding really good people to even coming to the table. I really do think the way in which we go about recruiting in the UK now and thinking about the roles that we have and what's actually required in those roles needs a serious rethink, and opening up organisations' eyes to the potential of people that are out there that they wouldn't otherwise see. There are an enormous amount of people on the autistic spectrum, very large number, in varying degree. Now, in your world, Steve, you were talking about systems testers. I mean, come on, do they need excellent communication skills? I'd argue possibly not, but we won't go there. So it's a huge amount of education, huge amount of rethinking around how we interview people, because I went for an interview for this job, first interview I've been in 22 years. Let me tell you, it was a great interview. I was well stressed. The questions I were asked were, you would say, and Steve, you would say, they're very good, competency-based, very well situationally structured. Couldn't bloody remember the question. But I told the story, and I'm sure the person who asked me couldn't remember what the question was anyway. So there's an awful lot of work in that space to really open up the field, if you like, in a post-COVID world.
Yeah, there's very good points. I think there's definitely a lot to be done, and a lot to get out of it when we get these things done. The benefits to employers and to society at large would be absolutely huge. And so Charlotte, do you have any sort of last thoughts or questions for?
I think really, just to sum up, that we've obviously been through an incredibly difficult period, for employers and for employees as well. And I'm hoping, this is my sort of glass half full kind of nature coming out here, that there's a lot of opportunity ahead. You know, it's not that we're, you know, completely out of the woods, but I do feel that there is a lot of opportunity out there. I've had the real privilege to work with some companies over the last few months that are growing, and they are hiring, and so there is a lot of positive stuff that's happening, and I think, you know, all of the things that we've talked about in terms of remote working and diversity, you know, there's lots of good stuff, so it's not all bad, and I think we've got a lot to look forward to in 2021. We just need to get this bloody vaccine into people.
No, I totally agree, Charlotte. I see a lot of positivity out there, and you know, companies I'm working with that are growing and are forecasting significant growth over the next 12 months. You know, the innovation that is going on around Gloucestershire, in particular, that I'm seeing, it's absolutely fantastic. And I'm really, you know, I talk to people, and quite often they come away and they say, you know what, I was really miserable before we started talking, but now I think there is a silver lining, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I genuinely believe that we have the opportunity to really take our work, our employment and our workforce in a really great direction over the next few years. And I think jobs are bouncing back very quickly. We're almost back to pre-COVID levels of vacancies. We have many more people looking to fill those vacancies now than we did pre-COVID, which is a problem we had then. So we're already getting towards a balance. We're not balancing type of vacancies yet. That's to come. You know, hospitality still struggling, tourism still struggling. But as we spoke about earlier, if companies can take advantage of those transferable skills, then we'll be able to balance everything quite quickly, I think. Jill, are there any further questions from the audience?
I don't think so. If Gerald or Manna have got a question, I think they can probably unmute themselves and ask it, yeah?
No. The silence speaks volumes.
Says no.
We've answered all their questions.
Thank you for joining us.
Oh, Gerald.
Hello.
I'm sorry to disappoint you. I haven't got a question, but just say I think it was a really interesting direction that you took the conversation in, and also, you know, I've been involved with apprentices for 50 odd years, and to hear them being talked about generally now is really encouraging. And this is a good practice for later on, because I see my camera's far too high.
You need to be a bit higher.
Yeah. Or the camera needs to be lower. Oh, wrong way.
I'm going to enjoy watching the recording for the construction forum with all these shenanigans going on.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you,
okay, thank you, Gerald.
Thank you, Manna.
So just to say, has been recorded, so we will be doing stuff with the recording. It won't be till Friday, because I don't come up for air until Friday. Then it'll be available for you guys to view and to send that link to anybody that might be interested in seeing. And one of the things I've agreed with Pete as well is we will look at whether we can take snippets of quotes out of and create little mini videos that you can then use in your marketing and on your LinkedIn posts and stuff, just to help keep the conversation going between the events.
Perfect.
Sounds great. Yeah, and I think there's a lot we discussed that we would like to get pushed out there.
We'll pick that up over the next couple of weeks and then start seeing what people might want to use. Yeah, because we've got all this content. It would be good to repurpose some of it. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Jill, for managing the hot desk.
You're very welcome.
Organising it. Thank you very much to Charlotte and Tony for taking part. It's been really enjoyed the conversation with you both. It's been great to hear your thoughts and opinions. Thanks for coming along.